They destroyed her career for telling the truth. 8 years later, she walked into the hearing that changed everything. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in that comments, along with the city you're watching from. And now, let's continue with the story. The bell above the door rang at exactly 7:30. Sloane Everett set her coffee on the counter and looked up. "I need to know if my landlord can change the locks while I am at work," said Ruth Gaines, 72, clutching a folded letter like it might fly away. Sloane took the letter and unfolded it. "When did you receive this?" "Yesterday." Ruth lowered herself into the chair across the desk. "He slid it under my door like a coward." Sloane scanned the page. Standard intimidation language. No legal standing. She had seen this letter, or one like it, 40 times in 8 years. "He cannot change your locks while you have an active lease." She turned the letter around and pointed. "This paragraph references a statute that does not exist." Ruth blinked. "He made it up. He made it up." Sloane pulled a fresh sheet from the drawer. "I am going to write him a response. You will hand it to him yourself. He will not bother you again." Ruth leaned forward. "How do you know?" "Because the last 3 tenants I wrote letters for are still in their apartments." Sloane smiled. "And he stopped answering my calls." The bell rang again at 8:15. Frank DeLuca, 68, retired fisherman, stood in the doorway with his cap in his hands. "Harbor master says I need a new mooring permit." He set a crumpled form on the counter. "This look right to you?" Sloane smoothed the paper. "Section 3 is blank. They will reject it. I filled in Section 3. You filled in Section 2 twice." She turned the form around and pointed. "This is Section 3. Frank squinted. "Well, that is why I come to you." She filled it in for him in 40 seconds. He nodded once, tucked the form into his jacket, and walked out. No thank you, no small talk. That was Frank. He had been coming to the clinic since she saved his house from a fraudulent eviction 6 years ago. His loyalty was not spoken. It was structural. The bell rang twice more before lunch, a will that needed updating. A woman whose ex-husband had stopped paying child support 3 months ago. Sloane handled each one at the counter with the same steady efficiency, the same legal precision she had once used in conference rooms that cost more per hour than most of these people earned in a week. The difference was the sign on the door, or rather, the absence of one. The storefront read, "Harborside Legal Aid Clinic" in small blue letters, no name attached, no Sloane Everett, no attorney at law, just the service. That was the way she wanted it. By 3:30, the afternoon had settled into the rhythm Sloane trusted most. Quiet, productive, invisible. She was reviewing a property tax dispute when the door opened and a backpack hit the floor. "I got an A on my spelling test," Lily announced, climbing onto the corner stool. "Which word was the hardest?" "Necessary." Lily pulled out a sketch pad. 2 S's. I almost put 1. 2 S's, Sloane confirmed. She watched her daughter arrange her pencils in a neat row. 7 years old, auburn hair that matched her own, green eyes already too observant for elementary school. Lily uncapped a blue pencil. "Mom, can I draw the harbor?" "You can draw whatever you want." "I want to draw the harbor." Lily pressed the pencil to the page. "With the boats." Sloane turned back to the tax dispute. The salt air drifted through the open window, carrying the sound of gulls and the low hum of a fishing boat heading out past the breakwater. Marblehead had given her this, a storefront, a community that asked only for help and never asked why she was here. The phone rang. Sloane picked it up on the second ring. Harborside Legal Aid. "Sloane, it is June." The voice was warm and direct, the way June Whittaker said everything. "Town council meeting is Thursday. They want you on the planning advisory board." Sloane leaned back in her chair. "June, I know what you are going to say. Then why are you calling?" "Because one day you are going to say yes, and I want to be the one who asked." June paused. "You cannot keep doing all this work and pretending nobody notices." "I am not pretending." Sloane picked up her pen. "I am more useful here than in a meeting." "Useful is not the same as visible, sweetheart." Sloane looked at Lily, who was drawing the lighthouse with careful, deliberate strokes. "I will think about it." "That is what you said in March." "And I thought about it." June laughed, short and warm. "All right. But I am calling again next month." "I know you are." Sloane hung up and set the phone down. Lily did not look up from her drawing. "Was that Miss June?" "It was. She wants you to do the meeting thing again." "She does." "Are you going to?" Sloane uncapped a highlighter. "I'm going to finish this tax dispute." Lily shrugged, the way 7-year-olds shrug when adults avoid questions. "Okay." At 5:15, Sloane locked the clinic door. The bell gave one final ring. She held Lily's hand, and they walked down Harbour Street toward the small apartment above the bait shop. The harbour was gold in the late afternoon light. Lobster boats rocked against their moorings. June waved from the general store window, and Sloane waved back. This was the life she had built. Small, steady, safe. No courtroom, no partner, no one who could take it away. The next morning, Sloane arrived at 7:20 and found an envelope taped to the clinic door. No return address. She peeled it off and turned it over. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of stationery that came from downtown Boston law firms. She did not open it, not yet. She held it against the morning light and saw the silhouette of a single folded page inside. The bell was silent. The street was still waking up. Sloane tucked the envelope into her bag and unlocked the door. The envelope sat in her bag for 3 hours before she opened it. She told herself she was busy. The Hendersons needed a notarized affidavit. Keiko Yamamoto wanted to update her will. But the truth was simpler than that. She was afraid of what was inside. At 10:45, between clients, Sloane pulled the envelope from her bag and slid her thumb under the seal. 1 page, heavy stock, a letterhead she had not seen in 8 years. Whitmore and Associates, attorneys at law, Boston, Dear Harborside Legal Aid Clinic. This letter serves as formal notice that Coastal Heritage Partners, represented by this firm, has filed structural deficiency findings with the Marblehead Planning Commission for the properties located at 14 through 42 Harbour Street. Pursuant to the municipal code, demolition proceedings will commence in 60 days unless an appeal is filed within the prescribed period. Sincerely, Philip Drummond. Senior partner Sloane read the name 3 times. Then she folded the letter, set it on the counter, and pressed both palms flat against the wood. The bell rang. She looked up. "Morning, Sloane." Frank DeLuca stood in the doorway, holding a newspaper. He set it on the counter without ceremony. Page 3. Sloane opened the paper. Coastal Heritage Partners proposes Harbour District revitalization. The article described a mixed-use development project, luxury condominiums, retail space, a boutique hotel. Estimated value, $180 million. The project required demolition of the existing Harbourside block. Her block, her clinic, her street. "June already called the selectman's office," Frank said. He leaned against the counter. "They told her the structural reports are filed and the buildings are condemned." "Condemned?" Sloane folded the newspaper. "These buildings are not condemned. I have lived and worked here for 8 years. The foundations are granite." "That is what I told them." "What did they say?" Frank adjusted his cap. "They said the report was conducted by a certified firm and the findings are final." "Nothing is final until the appeal period closes." Sloane reached for a legal pad. "Who signed the structural report?" "Did not ask." "I need to see that report." She wrote Planning Commission, request filed report on the pad, and circled it twice. And I need to see it today. Frank studied her face. 6 years he had been walking through this door, and he had never seen her pick up a pen that fast. You need help. I need the report. She tore the page from the pad. I will handle the rest. He nodded once and left. The bell rang behind him. Sloane stared at the name on the letterhead, Philip Drummond, senior partner. She had not spoken that name out loud in 8 years, had not typed it, written it, or acknowledged that it still existed in the world. But here it was, printed in the same serif font, on the same cream stationery, addressed to the life she had built on top of the ruins he left behind. At noon, June Whittaker crossed the street and walked into the clinic without knocking. She carried 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a woman who had already decided what needed to happen. "You got the letter?" June said. It was not a question. "I got the letter." June set the coffee on the counter. The whole street got letters, red notices on every door this morning. Tommy at the hardware store, Maria at the laundromat, the Chens at the dumpling shop, every single one. Sloane took the coffee. The deficiency reports are the key. If the structural findings are fraudulent, the demolition order collapses. Fraudulent. June sat down. You think someone lied. I think someone filed a report that says these granite foundations are failing. Sloane tapped the letterhead. And I think the lawyer behind it has a history of making documents say whatever he needs them to say. June watched her for a long moment. The AM radio behind the general store counter was playing something quiet. A boat horn sounded in the harbor. "You know this lawyer?" June said. Sloane picked up her coffee. "I used to." "How well?" "Well enough to know he does not make mistakes in his paperwork." She took a sip. "He makes deliberate choices." June leaned forward. "Sloane, you have spent 8 years helping every person on this street. You wrote my lease defense when I was 3 days from eviction. You did Frank's appeal when they tried to take his mooring. You did not charge a single dollar for any of it." She paused. "But you cannot protect everyone from behind a counter forever." Sloane set the cup down. "I am not hiding, June." "I did not say you were." June stood. "I said forever. There is a difference." June paused at the door. "One more thing. Tommy at the hardware store is talking about a community meeting. Everybody on the block. Thursday night at the store. I will be there." "Good." June pushed the door open. "Because the person who knows the law should probably be in the room when people start panicking." She crossed back to the general store. The bell rang as the door closed. Sloane sat with the coffee cooling in her hands. Outside, a man in a reflective vest was measuring the sidewalk with a tape wheel. He stopped in front of the clinic, wrote something on a clipboard, and moved on. At 3:30, Lily arrived with her backpack and her sketch pad. "Mom, were you a real lawyer, like in a courtroom?" Sloane looked up from the legal pad where she had been drafting the records request. "Where did you hear that?" "Miss Patterson said lawyers argue in front of judges." Lily climbed onto her stool. "Did you argue in front of judges?" Sloane set her pen down. "A long time ago." "Were you good at it?" The question sat between them like an open drawer. "I was very good at it," Sloane said, and she picked the pen back up before Lily could ask why she stopped. The Planning Commission office occupied the 2nd floor of Marblehead Town Hall, a brick building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Sloane arrived at 8:45 with a records request form already filled out. The receptionist looked at the form and then at Sloane. "You want the structural deficiency reports for the entire Harborside block? Every building between 14 and 42 Harbor Street? That is a lot of paper." "I brought a bag." Sloane set her canvas tote on the counter. "I also need the name of the engineering firm that conducted the assessments." The receptionist typed something into her computer. "Let me check with the commissioner." Sloane waited. The hallway was quiet. A clock on the wall ticked past 9 o'clock. Through the window, she could see the harbor and the roofline of her clinic 4 blocks below. A door opened behind the reception desk. A woman in a grey blazer stepped out, 50s, reading glasses pushed into dark blonde hair. She carried a manila folder and the careful expression of someone who had been briefed on what to say. "I am Helen Marsh, Planning Commissioner." She did not extend her hand. "You are from the Legal Aid Clinic." "Sloane Everett." She held Helen's gaze. "I submitted a records request for the structural deficiency reports filed against the Harborside properties." Helen glanced at the folder in her hand. "The reports are part of an active development filing. I can provide a summary, but the full engineering documents are under review." "Under review by whom?" "The developer's legal counsel." "Which means the public cannot see the documents that justify demolishing their homes." Helen shifted her weight. "The reports will be available after the review period, 30 days. The appeal window closes in 60 days. Sloane kept her voice level. "If I cannot see the reports for 30 of those days, that leaves the residents half the time they are entitled to under the municipal code." Helen set the folder on the reception counter. "I understand your concern, but the process is the process. The process is designed to protect residents, not developers." Sloane picked up the folder. "May I?" Helen hesitated. Then she nodded. Sloane opened it. Inside was a 2-page summary of the structural findings, building ages listed, foundation types catalogued, and at the bottom a signature line: "Assessment conducted by Meridian Structural Associates, filed by legal counsel Philip Drummond, Whitmore and Associates." There it was again. His name. Sloane closed the folder. Who selected Meridian Structural Associates for the assessment? The developer, not the city. The city accepted the developer's submission. Helen crossed her arms. "That is standard procedure for private development filings. Standard procedure is for the city to commission an independent assessment when demolition is involved." Sloane set the folder back on the counter. "Did the city conduct one?" Helen did not answer immediately. Her fingers moved to the edge of the folder, straightened it. "Not in this case." "Why not?" "Budget constraints." The words came out flat, rehearsed. Sloane looked at Helen Marsh for 3 full seconds without speaking. Helen did not look away, but her jaw tightened. "I will file a formal appeal on behalf of the Harborside residents within the week," Sloane said, "and I will be requesting the full engineering reports through a Public Records Act petition if they are not provided voluntarily." Helen picked up the folder. "I will pass your request to the city attorney." "Please do." Sloane turned toward the door, then stopped. "Commissioner Marsh, how long have you held this position?" 12 years. In 12 years, how many times has the city accepted a developer-funded structural assessment without independent verification? Helen's mouth opened, closed. She straightened her glasses. "I will look into that." Sloane walked out of the building and into the June morning. The harbor breeze carried salt and diesel. She reached the sidewalk and pulled out her phone. She did not call anyone. She opened the browser and typed, "Meridian Structural Associates." 3 minutes of searching told her what she needed to know. Meridian had been incorporated 4 years ago. Their principal engineer had a valid license. Their office address was a shared workspace in downtown Boston, and their client list, as far as public records showed, consisted of exactly one company, Coastal Heritage Partners. Sloane put the phone away. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking down at the harbor. The roofline of her clinic was visible between the trees. The laundromat, the dumpling shop, the hardware store with the American flag that Tommy replaced every spring, all of it on the list. She walked down the hill toward Harbour Street. She had filed records requests before. She had written appeals. She had challenged landlords and permit offices and insurance adjusters from behind her clinic counter for 8 years. But she had never gone to a government office and felt a commissioner lie to her face about why an independent assessment was not conducted. Budget constraints. The bell rang when she opened the clinic door. Lily would not arrive for another 5 hours. The afternoon was hers. Sloane set the canvas tote on the counter and pulled out a fresh legal pad. At the top of the first page, she wrote 2 words in capital letters: Philip Drummond. Below that, she wrote, Meridian Structural Associates, single client, incorporated 4 years ago. Below that, Helen Marsh, 12 years, budget constraints. She stared at the page. 8 years of quiet. 8 years of small cases and small victories, and a bell that rang when people needed her and silence when they did not. 8 years of not saying his name. She picked up the phone and dialed the county clerk. This is Sloane Everett. I need to file a formal appeal on behalf of the residents of the Harbourside Historic District. The clerk asked her to spell her last name. She did, slowly, and heard the keyboard clicks on the other end of the line. It was the first time in 8 years that her name appeared on a legal filing. That night, after Lily was asleep, Sloane sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a glass of water she had not touched. The apartment above the bait shop was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a home office after 9 o'clock. She typed Philip Drummond into the search bar and pressed Enter. The results loaded in columns. Whitmore and Associates partner page, LinkedIn profile, bar association listing, conference speaker bios, a photograph she had not seen before. Philip in a charcoal suit at a legal gala, shaking hands with a state senator. His hair was grayer at the temples now. He had grown into the kind of face that looked trustworthy on camera. She scrolled further. Coastal Heritage Partners appeared in his client list. 3 development projects in the last 2 years. All residential, all involving demolition of existing structures. In each case, the structural assessments were filed by the same firm, Meridian Structural Associates. Sloane opened a new tab and pulled up the Massachusetts Bar Association database. She searched for complaints filed against Whitmore and Associates in the last decade. One result appeared: a complaint filed 8 years ago against a former associate attorney for professional misconduct. The associate's name was redacted, but Sloane did not need to see it. She was the associate. She closed the laptop and pressed her palms against the table. The wood was cool. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and Lily's slow breathing from the next room. 8 years ago, she had been 29, third-year associate at Whitmore, youngest attorney on the corporate litigation team. She had found discrepancies in Philip's billing records while preparing a client's quarterly review. Overbilled hours, fabricated consultations, charges for services never rendered, all directed at elderly clients who did not read their invoices carefully. She had reported it to the managing partner. 2 weeks later, Philip filed an ethics complaint against her, alleging she had mishandled client funds. The complaint included documentation that she had never seen before, fabricated transfer records with her electronic signature. She was 3 months pregnant with Lily. The firm offered her a choice: resign quietly, and the complaint would be sealed, fight it, and it would go public. She chose Lily. The next morning, Sloane opened the clinic at 7:30. The bell rang, and Frank was standing in the doorway with a man she had never seen before. "This is the structural assessor," Frank said. "City sent him." The man behind Frank was tall, lean, early 40s, wire-rimmed glasses, steel-toed boots under a dress shirt. He carried a tablet in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Marcus Hale," He extended his hand. Meridian Structural Associates hired me as an independent reviewer for the Harborside assessment. Sloan did not take his hand immediately. Meridian hired you to review their own work. The city requested an independent review after receiving your appeal. He lowered his hand without offense. I am the independent part. Independent means you are not employed by the developer. Correct. I am a licensed structural engineer. I have no contract with Coastal Heritage Partners. He held up the tablet. I need access to every building on the block, starting with this one. Sloan studied him. Precise posture, direct eye contact. The kind of person who organized his tools by function and his schedule by the quarter hour. This building is a converted ship chandler's storefront, she said. Granite foundation, load-bearing walls on 3 sides, built in 1908. You know the structural history of the building. I know the structural history of every building on this street. She stepped aside and gestured toward the interior. You are welcome to assess, but I will be watching. Marcus Hale walked into the clinic and looked up at the ceiling, then down at the floor. He tapped the wall with his knuckle. He crouched and examined the baseboard where it met the floor. Whoever told you this building has structural deficiencies, he said, straightening, was either incompetent or lying. Sloan crossed her arms. Which do you think? He did not answer. He wrote something on the clipboard and moved toward the back wall. Frank leaned against the doorframe and watched. You trust this guy? I trust his license number. Sloan pulled out her phone and photographed the identification badge clipped to his shirt, and I will verify it before he leaves the block. Marcus Hale spent 3 hours assessing the clinic building. He measured wall thickness, checked load paths, examined the foundation from the crawl space, and photographed every structural element. He did not speak unless asked a question, and his answers were short and technical. At 11:30, he emerged from the crawl space with dust on his knees and set the tablet on the counter. This building is sound, he said. The original report lists foundation cracking and load-bearing failure. I found neither. Will that appear in your review? It will appear exactly as I found it. He picked up the tablet. I have 11 more buildings to assess. I know. Sloan handed him a glass of water. He took it without comment. How long will the full review take? 48 hours. I will need access to every unit. I can arrange that. She paused. The residents are afraid. Some of them have lived here for 30 years. They need to know the truth. Marcus set the glass on the counter. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with the hem of his shirt, and put them back on. The truth is what the assessment says, and the assessment will say exactly what I find. Nothing more. He walked out. The bell rang. Frank looked at Sloan. What do you think? I think he is either exactly what he says he is, she said, or the most convincing liar I have met since Philip Drummond. Frank grunted. That is a high bar. It is. Sloan watched Marcus Hale walk down Harbour Street with his clipboard, stopping at the next building. But the bar exists for a reason. The developer's presentation was scheduled for Thursday evening at Cromwell House, the Georgian mansion on the hill that Marblehead used for municipal events. Sloan arrived 15 minutes early and chose a seat in the 3rd row. The room filled quickly. Tommy from the hardware store sat 2 rows back with his wife. Maria from the laundromat stood near the door with the Chens from the dumpling shop. Frank took a position against the wall, arms folded, watching everyone who walked in. June sat next to Sloan and set her purse on her lap. Full house. They sent notices to every property owner on the block. Sloan opened her folder. 60 days to appeal. They are counting on people not knowing how. That is why you are here. That is why everyone is here. Sloan scanned the room. The question is who else shows up? At 6:15, 3 men in suits walked through the side entrance. The first was tall, silver-haired, with the handshake of someone who ran conference rooms. He introduced himself to Helen Marsh at the front table. "Ray Briggs," June whispered. "Coastal Heritage Partners. I looked him up." "What did you find?" "Self-made. Started in commercial real estate in the 90s. Bought his first development site at 31. Net worth somewhere north of 200 million. June paused. "His mother grew up in Revere. Working class." Sloane filed that away. The second suit was a project manager. The third walked in last, and Sloane's hands stopped moving. Philip Drummond crossed the room like he owned it. He had always walked like that, suit perfectly tailored, briefcase that cost more than some of the cars in the parking lot. He shook Helen Marsh's hand, exchanged a word with Ray Briggs, and turned to face the audience. His eyes found Sloane in the third row. He did not look surprised. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that said, "I was wondering when you would show up." Sloane did not look away. She held the folder in her lap and kept her face neutral. Somewhere behind her breastbone, something tightened. She did not name it. Ray Briggs took the podium. His presentation was polished. Renderings of the new development appeared on the screen. Modern buildings with glass facades, green spaces, retail on the ground floor. He spoke about economic growth, tax revenue, construction jobs. He used phrases like harbor revitalization and community enhancement with the ease of someone who believed them. When he finished, Helen Marsh opened the floor for questions. Tommy stood up first. "What happens to the people who live here now?" Ray Briggs paused. "The development plan includes a relocation assistance program for current residents." "Relocation to where?" Tommy pressed. "I have been on Harbor Street for 22 years. Philip stepped forward. "The relocation timeline and options are detailed in the development filing, which is available for public review at the Planning Commission office." Tommy sat down. He did not look satisfied. An older woman in the back raised her hand. "My husband built our house in 1967. Are you telling me a structural report says it is falling down?" "The assessments were conducted by a certified engineering firm," Philip said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "The findings are consistent with buildings of this age and construction." Sloane stood. The room shifted. "The findings are consistent with a report filed by a firm that has exactly one client." She did not raise her voice. "Coastal Heritage Partners engaged Meridian Structural Associates to conduct the assessments. The city did not commission an independent review." Helen Marsh's jaw tightened. Philip's smile did not change. "Furthermore," Sloane continued, "an independent structural engineer has been conducting a review of the harborside buildings for the past 48 hours. His preliminary findings contradict the original report." The room murmured. Frank uncrossed his arms. Philip tilted his head. "And who commissioned this independent review?" "I did, on behalf of the residents." "And you are?" He knew exactly who she was. Every person in the room could see it. But he asked anyway, and the question landed with the precision of a lawyer who understood that public record was built one answer at a time. "Sloane Everett." She held his gaze. "Attorney for the Harborside Legal Aid Clinic." Philip's smile broadened. "Sloane. It has been a long time." The familiarity of her first name hit the room like a cold draft. June looked at Sloane. Frank straightened against the wall. "It has," Sloane said. "I see your approach to documentation has not changed." The smile faded, just slightly, just enough. Philip recovered quickly. He always had. "The Harborside Legal Aid Clinic is not a party to the development filing. Any appeal would need to be filed by the property owners individually or through a licensed attorney of record." "I am a licensed attorney." Sloane held up the folder. "And I filed the appeal 3 days ago on behalf of 14 property owners. The Planning Commission has it on file. You can check with Commissioner Marsh." Helen Marsh did not speak. She looked at the table in front of her. Ray Briggs stepped in. "We welcome community input and will take all feedback under consideration. The development timeline remains as presented." The meeting ended at 7:45. People filed out in clusters, talking in low voices. Tommy stopped Sloan at the door. "You know that lawyer. I used to work with him. Is he the kind of person who would fake a report?" Sloan picked up her bag. "He is the kind of person who makes documents say exactly what he needs them to say." Outside, the evening air was cool. The harbor lights reflected on the water. Sloan walked to her car and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she did not recognize. "You should have stayed invisible, Sloan. This does not have to be difficult." She stared at the screen for 10 seconds. Then she deleted the message and drove home. Sloan spent Friday morning at the clinic filing the formal challenge. She used the clinic's name on the header, not her own. She had done it deliberately. The appeal from Tuesday had been filed under her name. But the formal challenge to the demolition order, the document that would require a hearing, she filed as Harborside Legal Aid Clinic v. Coastal Heritage Partners. She told herself it was strategic. A clinic had institutional standing. A clinic could not be discredited by a personal ethics complaint. A clinic was not a woman with a sealed disciplinary file. But the truth was simpler. She was not ready to stand in front of a courtroom with her name on the line. Not yet. Maybe not ever. At 10 o'clock, her phone rang. She recognized the area code. Boston. "Sloan." Philip's voice was the same. Measured, warm on the surface, controlled underneath. "I want you to know that I have nothing but respect for what you have done in Marblehead." She leaned back in her chair. "Is that what this call is about? Respect? This call is about practical reality." A pause. Papers shuffling. "The Harborside development has city approval, state environmental clearance, and a $180 million commitment from Coastal Heritage Partners. Your appeal is going to delay the timeline by a few weeks, and then it will be dismissed. On what grounds? On the grounds that an anonymous legal aid clinic does not have standing to challenge a properly filed development order." He let that land. "Unless the attorney of record puts her name on it, and we both know why you will not do that." Sloan's grip tightened on the phone. She said nothing. "I am not threatening you," Philip continued. His voice dropped half a register, the way it always did when he was most dangerous. "I am telling you what will happen. The challenge will be dismissed. The development will proceed. And the only thing that changes is how many weeks you cost your neighbors before they get their relocation checks." Relocation checks. Sloan stood and walked to the window. Harbor Street was quiet. June was arranging a display in the store window. Tommy was sweeping the sidewalk in front of the hardware store. "You are offering relocation checks to people who have lived here for 30 years. I am offering a fair process." "You filed fraudulent structural reports, Philip. That is not a fair process. That is the same thing you did to me." Silence on the line. 4 seconds. 5. "That is a serious accusation, Sloan. It is an observation based on pattern recognition." She turned from the window. Meridian Structural Associates. One client, one type of report, one outcome every time. Demolition, and the same attorney filing every one of them. Meridian is a certified firm. Certified and credible are not the same thing. Another pause. When Philip spoke again, his voice had changed. The warmth was gone. "File whatever you want, Sloan. I will see you at the hearing." He hung up. Sloan set the phone on the counter and pressed both hands flat against the wood, the same gesture she had used the day she read the demolition letter. The wood was cool and solid, and it did not move. At 1 o'clock, Marcus Hale walked into the clinic with his tablet and a manila envelope. "I finished the review." He set the envelope on the counter. "All 12 buildings." Sloane opened it. 24 pages of structural assessments, photographs, measurements, and engineering notations. "Summary?" she asked. "Every building on the block has a sound structural foundation. Load-bearing walls are intact. Roofing needs maintenance in 3 locations, but that is cosmetic, not structural." He tapped the tablet. "The original Meridian report lists foundation cracking in 9 of 12 buildings. I found cracking in 0. 0. 0. He set the tablet down. "The original report is either the worst assessment I have seen in 20 years of engineering, or it was written without ever entering the buildings." Sloane looked at him over the top of the envelope. "You are putting this in your official review?" "I already submitted it." He adjusted his glasses. "Electronically, to the Planning Commission, the City Attorney, and the developer's project manager. 45 minutes ago. You submitted your contradicting assessment to the developer's team before telling me." "I submitted it to everyone at the same time." He met her eyes. "I am not on your side, and I am not on theirs. I am on the side of what the buildings actually look like." Sloane held his gaze for a long moment. There was no deflection in it, no calculation, just the flat certainty of a man who measured things for a living and trusted what the measurements said. "Thank you," she said, "for doing the work honestly. That is not a compliment." He picked up his tablet. "That is a baseline expectation." He walked out. The bell rang. Sloane sat with the 24 pages spread across the counter. 12 buildings, 0 structural deficiencies. A report that contradicted the developer's findings on every single point. She had filed the challenge under the clinic's name, anonymous, safe, invisible. But the challenge would be dismissed unless an attorney of record put a name on it. And Philip knew it. He had said so on the phone, and he was right. The clinic did not have standing, only a named attorney did. Sloane picked up her pen. She pulled a fresh sheet of legal paper from the drawer. At the top, she wrote, "Amendment to Formal Challenge, Harborside Legal Aid Clinic v. Coastal Heritage Partners, Attorney of Record, Sloane Everett, bar number 74321. She stared at her own name for a full minute. Then she signed the bottom of the page. The bell was silent. The street was getting dark. But the pen was in her hand, and her name was on the paper, and for the first time in 8 years, it was not hiding. Marcus Hale was already at the clinic when Sloane arrived Monday morning. He was sitting on the front step with his tablet, a coffee from June's store in his hand, and a legal pad balanced on his knee. "You are here early," Sloane said. She unlocked the door. The bell rang. "I wanted to show you something before your clients arrive." He followed her inside and set the tablet on the counter. "I ran the numbers on the Meridian report over the weekend." "You spent your weekend analyzing their report?" "I spent my weekend trying to understand how a licensed firm could produce findings this far from reality." He tapped the screen. A table of measurements appeared. "Column 1 is what Meridian reported. Column 2 is what I found." Sloane leaned in. The discrepancies were not subtle. Foundation thickness measured at 4 inches by Meridian versus 12 inches in Marcus's assessment. Load-bearing capacity rated as critical failure in the original report versus within standard parameters in his. "These are not rounding errors," she said. "No." Marcus scrolled to the next page. "These are fabrications, specific, deliberate, and consistent across every building." "How consistent?" "The same exaggeration ratio. Every measurement in the Meridian report inflates the deficiency by the same factor, 0.73. He tapped a highlighted row. "That is not a mistake. That is a formula applied to real data to produce a predetermined outcome. Sloane stared at the screen. Her pulse had quickened, but her voice stayed level. Can you prove that in a hearing? I can present the data. A forensic engineer could confirm the systematic pattern. He closed the tablet cover. But that is not my job. My job was to assess the buildings. I assessed them. They are sound. And you submitted your findings to the city. I submitted them to everyone. He picked up his coffee, which is why my employer called me at 6 this morning to ask what I was doing. Sloane looked at him. What did you tell them? I told them I was doing my job. He took a sip. They suggested I reconsider your findings, reconsider my employment priorities. He set the cup down. I am on a 6-month contract. They can terminate at any time. Sloane pulled her own legal pad across the counter and started writing, Meridian Structural Associates, 0.73 ratio, systematic fabrication. If you can prove the formula was applied uniformly, she said, that changes the nature of the challenge. This is not a disagreement between engineers. This is fraud. I know what it is. Marcus set his coffee down, which is why I spent the weekend on it instead of unpacking the last 12 boxes in my cottage. You have been here 3 weeks and you have not unpacked. I have been here 3 weeks and I have been inside crawl spaces for most of them. He almost smiled. The boxes can wait. The bell rang. A woman walked in with an envelope of her own, another tenant with questions about the demolition notice. Sloane helped her at the counter while Marcus sat in the corner chair and worked on his tablet. 2 more tenants followed, a man with a lease question, an elderly couple who needed help understanding the relocation offer. Between clients, Sloane glanced at Marcus in the corner. He was cross-referencing photographs with measurements, his brow furrowed, his glasses sliding down his nose. He pushed them back without breaking focus. When the last client left, Marcus spoke without looking up. Why did you leave law? Sloane was filing the tenant's paperwork. She did not stop. That is a personal question. You asked me to risk my contract to tell the truth about these buildings. He looked up. I think a personal question is fair. She set the file in the drawer, closed it. I left because someone made a document say something it should not have said, and it cost me everything. Marcus was quiet for a moment. The same person who signed these reports. The same person. She met his eyes. Which is why I know what the 0.73 ratio means. He has a method, and he has used it before. The clinic was quiet. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past on Harbour Street. My wife died 2 years ago, Marcus said. He said it the way people say things they have practiced, controlled, measured, with the weight distributed evenly across each word. Cancer. I was working a 60-hour project in Seattle when she passed. My son was with her. I was not. Sloane stood still behind the counter. I moved to the East Coast because I could not stay in a house where I was never home enough. He picked up his coffee, looked at it, set it back down. I took this contract because it was short-term and somewhere I had never been. Marblehead was supposed to be temporary. And now I submitted a report that calls my client's entire project fraudulent. He gave a dry, humorless smile. So temporary might be getting shorter. Sloane watched him for a moment. He was not asking for comfort. He was not performing grief. He was laying facts on a counter the way he laid measurements on a page, precisely, without embellishment. I am sorry about your wife, she said. Thank you. He stood. I have to review the crawl space photos for the supplemental report. May I use the back room? Second door on the left. He walked to the back. The bell did not ring. At 3:30, Lily arrived. She set her backpack on the stool and looked at the back room. Who is the man with the glasses? His name is Marcus. He is an engineer. What does he build? He measures things to see if they are strong enough. Lily considered this. Is our building strong enough? Sloane smiled. Our building is one of the strongest on the street. Good. Lily opened her sketchpad. Because I like it here. From the back room, Sloane could hear the faint tapping of Marcus's keyboard. Outside, the harbor was turning gold. June waved from across the street, and Sloane waved back, and the bell sat quiet above the door. Let us play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type bell in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. Now let us continue with the story. Tuesday evening, Sloane pulled a cardboard box from the top shelf of her bedroom closet. She had not opened it in 8 years. The packing tape was yellowed and brittle. She peeled it off and lifted the lid. Inside, 3 years of legal documents, case files, billing records, correspondence, and at the bottom, a manila folder with a red tab. She pulled it out and set it on the kitchen table. The folder contained a single document. The ethics complaint that Philip Drummond had filed against her, 8 pages, her name, her alleged violations, and attached 3 pages of financial transfer records that she had never authorized, never seen, and never signed, until they appeared in the complaint with her electronic signature. She carried the folder to the clinic the next morning and set it on the counter next to Marcus's tablet. I need you to look at something, she said. Marcus set down his coffee. He opened the folder and read the first page without expression, then the second. On the third page, he stopped. These transfer records. He pointed at a column of figures. The signature formatting. Is this the same system your firm used for all electronic authorizations? The same system. But I did not sign those documents. He turned to the Meridian report and placed it next to the ethics complaint. Side by side, Sloane leaned in. Look at the header formatting on the transfer records, Marcus said. Now look at the measurement tables in the Meridian report. Sloane looked. The column structure was identical. The same serif font, the same spacing between data points. The same way numerical values aligned to the right margin. Same formatting template, she said. Same hand. Marcus adjusted his glasses. Whoever created these financial records used the same document template as the structural report. That is not a coincidence. That is a signature. Sloane's hands were steady, but her jaw had tightened. She pulled the ethics complaint closer and traced the column headers with her finger. 8 years she had kept this document in a box. 8 years she had told herself it did not matter because she had chosen to walk away. He used the same method, she said. 8 years ago he fabricated financial records to destroy my career. Now he is fabricating structural reports to destroy this neighborhood. And using the same template to do it. Marcus closed the folder. This is not engineering fraud. This is a pattern of document forgery. Frank walked in. The bell rang. He looked at the documents spread across the counter and stopped. Morning. He set a bag of muffins from June's store next to the papers. You two look like you found something. We found a pattern, Sloane said. She turned the ethics complaint so Frank could see the header. The same person who fabricated the report that ended my career 8 years ago fabricated the structural reports for the demolition order. Frank looked at the documents. He did not pick them up. He looked at Sloane. You are telling me this Drummond used the same trick twice. The same trick, the same template, the same formatting. Sloane straightened the papers. Different victim, same method. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the bag and set a blueberry muffin next to her coffee. Eat something. You have been here since 6. I have been here since 5:30. Eat something. He turned to Marcus. You? I already ate. Then eat again. Frank set a second muffin on the tablet. Both of you look like you forgot that people need food. Marcus took the muffin without comment. Frank nodded once and walked to the door. Frank, Sloane called. He turned. "Thank you for the muffins." He adjusted his cap. "Do not thank me. Thank June. She baked them at 4 in the morning because she said you would forget to eat." He walked out. The bell rang. Sloane looked at Marcus. "She bakes at 4 in the morning. Apparently." He bit into the muffin. "Is she always like that?" "She delivered my daughter." Sloane picked up the blueberry muffin. 7 years ago, Lily came 3 weeks early and the hospital was 40 minutes away. June drove me there, held my hand through 17 hours of labor, and brought me home the next day with a casserole and a list of pediatricians. Marcus set the muffin down. "That is not a neighbor. That is family." "She is." Sloane took a bite. "Which is why this street is worth fighting for. It is not about the buildings, Marcus. It is about the people who built their lives inside them." He did not respond immediately. He picked up the ethics complaint and looked at it again. The numbers, the formatting, the pattern that connected 8 years of silence to the present. "Who are you going to show this to?" he asked. "The hearing panel. When it happens." Sloane stacked the documents neatly. "If it happens. It will happen." Marcus set his muffin down and opened his tablet. "Because I submitted my supplemental report this morning, the one with the .73 ratio analysis. The city attorney now has independent evidence that the original assessments were fabricated." Sloane looked at him. "You did not tell me you were submitting today." "I did not need your permission." He met her eyes. "I needed the data to be ready. It was ready." She held his gaze. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with structural reports or legal filings. It was the recognition of a specific kind of person, the kind who does what is right, without asking whether it is convenient. "Marcus," she paused, "who is paying you now that your employer wants you to reconsider?" "Nobody." He opened a photograph on the tablet and enlarged it. "I am doing this on my own time." The bell sat silent above the door. The morning light was shifting across the counter, catching the edge of the manila folder. Sloane finished her muffin and turned back to the documents. The hearing notice arrived on a Thursday. Helen Marsh signed it herself. The formal challenge hearing for the Harborside demolition order would take place in 3 weeks at Cromwell House. Sloane read it twice, folded it, and set it on the counter. 3 weeks, she said to the empty clinic. At 10 o'clock, a man in a dark suit walked through the door. He was not a client. He handed Sloane a certified letter and left without speaking. She opened it. Legal correspondence from Whitmore and Associates. Dear Miss Everett, this letter constitutes formal notice that Coastal Heritage Partners, through its legal counsel, intends to petition the hearing panel for your disqualification as attorney of record in the pending matter of Harborside Legal Aid Clinic v. Coastal Heritage Partners. The basis for this petition is the sealed disciplinary record associated with your Massachusetts bar number. Specifically, the ethics complaint filed 8 years ago and the voluntary resignation that followed. We trust this will not require further escalation. Sincerely, Philip Drummond. Senior partner. Sloane set the letter down. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was not. He was going to use her past to disqualify her from defending the present. The sealed ethics complaint, the one he fabricated, was now his weapon to remove her from the case entirely. Marcus arrived at 11. He read the letter standing at the counter. Can he do this? Marcus asked. The complaint is sealed, but the fact that I resigned is public record. Sloane leaned against the counter. He does not need to prove the complaint was valid. He just needs to create enough doubt about my credibility that the panel questions my standing. And the panel listens to doubt. The panel listens to documentation. She picked up the letter. Philip does not argue with words. He argues with paper. He files things, he creates records, he builds a narrative out of forms and letterheads and official-looking documents until the truth looks like the exception instead of the rule. Marcus crossed his arms. So what do you do? I do what I have been doing for 8 years. She folded the letter and put it in the filing cabinet. I prepare a case, I gather evidence, and I present it to someone who can tell the difference between the truth and a well-formatted lie. That afternoon, Ray Briggs called the clinic directly. Sloane answered on the third ring. Miss Everett, this is Ray Briggs. His voice was different from Philip's, direct, less polished. The voice of a man who had built things with his hands before he built them with money. I would like to meet. I am available at the clinic. I was thinking somewhere neutral. The cafe on Washington Street. I will be there at 4. They met at a corner table. Ray Briggs was shorter than he appeared at the presentation. Broad shoulders, calloused hands that looked out of place holding a porcelain espresso cup. He ordered for himself and waited for Sloane to order. I read your attorney's appeal, he said, and I read your engineer's supplemental report. Then you know the original structural assessments are fabricated. I know they are contradicted. He set the cup down. Fabricated is a legal conclusion. Contradicted is a factual one. Fair. Sloane folded her hands on the table. What do you want, Mr. Briggs? I want to build something in Marblehead. He leaned forward. I have invested 18 months and $11 million in this project. I believe it will be good for the town. I believe the Harbor District needs modernization. And the people who live there. I am offering relocation assistance, fair market value for every property, moving costs, temporary housing subsidies. Fair market value for a home is not the same as the value of a home. Sloane held his gaze. Some of those buildings have been in the same family for 50 years. Briggs nodded slowly. My mother grew up in Revere, in a house her father built. When the highway expansion came through, they offered fair market value too. He paused. She never forgave them for it. Sloane studied him. Then why are you doing the same thing? Because I thought the buildings were actually failing. He picked up the espresso. That is what my team told me. That is what the structural report said. That is what my attorney presented as fact. And now that you know the reports are contradicted, now I want the truth. He set the cup down hard enough to rattle the saucer. I did not build a company by accepting documents I cannot verify. I should have verified these before I filed them. You should have. He looked at her for a long moment. I am not offering to drop the project, Miss Everett. But I am telling you that if the hearing proves the assessments are fraudulent, I will have a very different conversation with my legal counsel. Sloane stood. I appreciate your directness. And I appreciate that you are not trying to destroy my project. He stood as well. You're trying to save a neighborhood. Those are not the same thing. No, Sloane said. They are not. Outside the cafe, Briggs stopped on the sidewalk. One more thing. My attorney does not know about this meeting. I would prefer it stay that way. Understood. And Miss Everett. He put his hands in his pockets. If your evidence holds up at the hearing, I expect an honest conversation about what happens next. Not a lawsuit. A conversation. That is all I have ever wanted, Sloane said. A conversation based on facts. He nodded once and walked to a silver sedan parked at the curb. Sloane watched him drive away. She walked back to the clinic in the late afternoon light. The harbor was calm. A fishing boat was coming in with the day's catch. She could see June in the store window and Tommy sweeping and the roofline of every building on the block. And for the first time in 3 weeks, the weight on her chest was not fear. It was something closer to purpose. But purpose did not stop Philip Drummond, and 3 weeks was not very long. The headline appeared on a Wednesday morning. Sloane was walking to the clinic when she saw it on the newsstand outside June's store. Disgraced attorney leads, Harborside demolition challenge, sealed ethics complaint raises questions about legal aid clinic. She bought the paper, read it standing on the sidewalk. The article was thorough. It named her. It referenced the sealed complaint without detailing the allegations, which was worse. It let the reader imagine the worst. It quoted an unnamed source at Whitmore and Associates saying the complaint involved mishandling of client funds. The source was not unnamed. The source was Philip. By 9 o'clock, 3 clients had cancelled their appointments. Ruth Gaines called first. "Sloane, I just want to understand." Ruth's voice was careful. "The paper says there was a complaint." There was a complaint. It was fabricated by the same person who fabricated the structural reports. Silence on the line. Then, "I believe you, but my daughter read the article and she is worried." "Tell your daughter I have never mishandled a cent in my life." Sloane gripped the phone. The complaint was filed by Philip Drummond 8 years ago to cover his own fraud. "I resigned because I was pregnant, and I chose my daughter over a fight I did not have the strength for." Ruth was quiet. "I will tell her that." She hung up. The bell did not ring for the next 2 hours. At 11, June crossed the street. She did not bring coffee this time. She sat in the chair across from Sloane and folded her hands in her lap. "I read the article," June said. "I know. I wish you had told me yourself." The words landed precisely where they were aimed. Sloane set her pen down. "I should have. I know that. I have spent 8 years not talking about it, and I convinced myself that silence was the same as moving forward. It is not. No." Sloane pressed her palms against the counter. "It is not." June studied her face. 12 years of friendship. June had driven her to the hospital when Lily was born, had held her hand through labor, had brought her home and stocked her refrigerator, and never once asked why a woman with a law degree from Boston University was running a free clinic in a converted Ship Chandler's storefront. "I did not ask because I figured you would tell me when you were ready," June said. "But now the newspaper is telling me, and that is not how this should have gone." "You are right." Sloane's voice was steady, but her throat was tight. "Philip Drummond was my law partner at Whitmore and Associates. I discovered he was overbilling elderly clients, fabricating consultations, charging for services he never provided. I reported it to the managing partner. And 2 weeks later, Philip filed an ethics complaint against me. Fabricated financial records with my electronic signature. The firm gave me a choice: resign quietly or fight it publicly while 3 months pregnant." June's expression did not change. "You chose Lily. I chose Lily. And now the same man is trying to demolish our street, using the same method." Sloane opened the drawer and pulled out the ethics complaint folder. She set it on the counter. The same document template, the same formatting tricks, the same way of making lies look like official records. June looked at the folder but did not open it. She looked at Sloane instead. "You listen to me," June said. Her voice was the voice she used when she meant business, low, clear, and absolute. "I watched you deliver your daughter. I watched you build this clinic from nothing. I watched you help every single person on this street without charging a dollar, without asking for credit, without putting your name on anything." Sloane did not speak. "A man who forges documents does not get to define who you are." June stood. "Not in my store, not on my street, and not in my town." She walked out. The bell rang. At 1 o'clock, Marcus called. "My employer terminated my contract this morning." Sloane closed her eyes. "Because of the supplemental report. Because I refused to amend it. They wanted me to add a qualification that my findings were preliminary and subject to further review." He paused. My findings are not preliminary. They are final. What are you going to do? Finish the work. His voice was flat, professional. The voice of a man who had already done the math and accepted the answer. The hearing is in 2 weeks. I will be there. Marcus, you just lost your income. I lost a contract. My income is a different conversation. Another pause. My son asked me this morning why I moved us across the country for a job I just got fired from. What did you tell him? I told him that sometimes doing the right thing costs more than doing the wrong thing, and that the cost is the point. Sloane leaned against the counter. Through the window she could see the harbor and the roofline of every building on the block, the buildings that were sound, the buildings that someone had lied about to justify tearing them down. Thank you, she said. You keep thanking me. His voice softened half a degree. Stop. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because the buildings are sound and the report says otherwise. That is enough. He hung up. Sloane set the phone down. The clinic was empty. The waiting chairs were unoccupied. The legal pads were stacked neatly. The bell above the door hung motionless, and the newspaper was still on the counter, her name in the headline, her past laid bare for everyone on Harbour Street to read. She did not cry. She did not close the clinic. She picked up her pen and turned to the next page of the legal pad. 2 weeks until the hearing. 2 weeks to build a case that proved Philip Drummond had been forging documents for a decade. 2 weeks to convince a panel that the woman the newspaper called disgraced was the only person telling the truth. She started writing. Monday morning, 7:30. Sloane unlocked the clinic door. The bell rang. Nobody came. She set up the waiting area the way she always did. Legal pads on the counter, pens in the cup, the filing cabinet unlocked, water pitcher filled. She opened the window and the salt air drifted in, carrying the sound of harbour traffic and the cry of a gull somewhere above the roofline. 8 o'clock. No bell. 9 o'clock. No bell. By 10, Sloane was sitting behind the counter with the legal pad open and nothing written on it. She had called 4 clients to confirm appointments. 2 did not answer. 1 said she had found another attorney in Salem. The 4th, an elderly man named Walter who needed help with a property tax appeal, said he would come in later. He did not come in later. At noon, Sloane stood and walked to the window. Harbour Street was the same as always. June was in her store. Tommy was loading lumber into his truck. 2 women she recognized from the Tuesday morning coffee group walked past the clinic without looking in. The bell was silent, the kind of silent that weighed more than noise. She sat back down. She picked up the newspaper from the counter. The article was 4 days old now, but it was still the most recent thing anyone on the street had read about her. Disgraced attorney, sealed complaint, questions about credibility. Philip had not needed a courtroom. He had used a newspaper, the same way he used documents, precisely, quietly, and with the understanding that ink on paper carries more authority than words in the air. At 3:30, the door opened. Lily walked in with her backpack and her sketch pad and the untroubled expression of a 7-year-old who did not read newspapers. She climbed onto her stool. It is quiet today. It is. Lily opened the sketch pad. Where is everybody? People are busy. Sloane picked up a pen she did not need. Some people have appointments on other days. Lily looked at the empty waiting chairs. Then she looked at her mother. Her green eyes held the kind of clarity that only children possess, the kind that sees through practiced smiles and rehearsed explanations. Mom. Lily set her pencil down. Are we going to lose our home? The question hit like a stone dropped into still water. Sloane set the pen on the counter. She looked at her daughter. No, she said. We are not going to lose our home. Promise. Sloane walked around the counter and crouched in front of Lily's stool. She took both of her daughter's hands. They were small and warm and smudged with graphite from the morning's drawing. I promise that I will do everything I can to make sure we stay right here. She squeezed Lily's hands. And I promise that no matter what happens, you and I are going to be okay. Lily studied her mother's face with the seriousness of a child deciding whether to trust. Then she nodded. Okay. Lily picked up her pencil and went back to her drawing. Sloane stayed crouched for a moment, watching the pencil move across the page. Lily was drawing the clinic, the counter, the bell above the door. Sloane stood and walked to the back room. She closed the door. She leaned against the wall and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. 8 years. 8 years of building this life from the wreckage of the one Philip destroyed. 8 years of helping people without asking for help. 8 years of keeping her name off everything, because the last time her name appeared on anything official, it was attached to a lie. And now the bell was silent. The clients were gone. The community she had served was reading a newspaper article written by a man who had never set foot on Harbour Street, quoting a source who had every reason to lie. She lowered her hands. She looked at the wall. There was a photograph pinned above the desk. Lily, at 2 years old, sitting on the clinic counter, reaching for the bell. Sloane unpinned the photograph. She held it for a long time. Then she set it face down on the desk and walked back to the counter. At 4:15, the door opened. June walked in. She did not sit down. "The Tuesday coffee group is meeting at my store tonight," June said. 8 women. Half of them read the article. The other half heard about it. Are they angry? They are confused. June set a paper bag on the counter. "I brought you dinner. Eat it." "June, do not argue with me about food. Sloane Everett." She pointed at the bag. "Chicken pot pie. It is still warm." Sloane took the bag. Her hands were not entirely steady. "The meeting is at 7, June said. "You do not have to come, but you should." She left. The bell rang. Sloane looked at the bag. She opened it. The smell of pastry and chicken filled the clinic, and for one moment the emptiness was not quite so heavy. At 5 o'clock, she locked the clinic door. The bell gave its final ring of the day. She held Lily's hand, and they walked home in the evening light. The harbour was grey. The boats rocked in their moorings. June's store was already closed. Sloane made dinner. She helped Lily with her homework. She read her a chapter of the book they were working through, a story about a girl who sailed across the Pacific in a small boat. After Lily was asleep, Sloane sat at the kitchen table in the dark. She did not turn on the light. She did not open the laptop. She sat in the chair and listened to the sound of her daughter breathing in the next room and the distant murmur of the harbour below the window. She had built this life to be invisible, safe, protected. And Philip had reached into it with 8 paragraphs in a newspaper and pulled the walls down. The question was not whether she could fight back. She knew how to fight. She had been a corporate litigator. She had argued in front of federal judges. She had won cases that partners twice her age could not close. The question was whether she was willing to be seen again. She sat in the dark for a long time, and she did not have an answer. There was a knock on the clinic door at 8 o'clock that evening. Sloane had not gone to the coffee meeting. She was sitting on the floor behind the counter with the ethics complaint folder in her lap and the lights turned low. She did not move. The knock came again, then a voice. "Sloane, it is Marcus." She stood, unlocked the door. He was standing on the step in jeans and a flannel shirt. No clipboard, no tablet. He looked like a different person without his work uniform. "June told me you did not come to the meeting," he said. "She said I should check on you." "June sends a lot of people to check on me. She is efficient." He looked past her into the dim clinic. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He walked in. The bell rang softly. He did not sit in the client chair. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall opposite the counter. Sloane looked at him for a moment. then sat back down on her side, the counter between them, both of them on the floor. "My son asked me tonight if we are moving again," Marcus said. He pulled a thread from the cuff of his flannel. "He has moved 4 times since his mother died. Seattle to Portland, Portland to a rental in Burlington, Burlington to here." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I did not know." He looked at the ceiling. "I have been telling him I do not know a lot lately. He is 12. He is tired of answers that are not answers. He sounds like Lily. She asked me today if we were going to lose our home." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I would do everything I could." Sloane rested her head against the counter, which is not the same as saying yes. The clinic was quiet. The harbor sounds drifted through the closed window, a rope clinking against a mast, the low churn of a boat engine running idle. "I was supposed to be home," Marcus said. "The night she died, I was supposed to be there. I had taken on an extra project because the bonus would pay for a trip she wanted to take when the treatment was over." He paused. "The treatment was not going to be over. I knew that, but I took the project anyway because working was easier than sitting in that hospital room watching her lose weight." Sloane did not speak. She sat with the weight of what he said and did not try to lighten it. "Ethan was there," Marcus continued. 12 years old, sitting in a hospital chair, holding his mother's hand while she died, and I was in an office building in downtown Seattle, looking at structural drawings for a parking garage. His voice did not break. It stayed level, but his hands were still, and his eyes were fixed on the wall above Sloane's head, and something in the stillness of his body said everything his voice did not. "That is why I moved. Not because Seattle was too painful, because every room in that house reminded me that I chose the wrong thing, every time." He pulled the thread from his cuff and wound it around his finger. "And when I came here and found those reports were forged, I thought, this is the one time I am going to choose right, even if it costs me the contract, even if it costs me the job. Because my son is watching, and I am not going to let him see me look the other way again." Sloane closed her eyes. "I left law because I was afraid. Not because of Lily, not because of the pregnancy, not because of the sealed complaint. I was afraid that if I fought and lost, the loss would follow me forever, and I thought that if I just disappeared, at least I could control the terms." She opened her eyes. "I was wrong. Disappearing is not the same as choosing. And 8 years of being invisible did not protect me from anything. It just delayed the moment I would have to stand up." Marcus looked at her. The dim light from the street lamp outside caught the edge of his glasses. "So stand up. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple." He leaned forward. "You have the evidence. You have the pattern. You have an engineer who will testify that the reports are fabricated, and you have a community that watched you help them for 8 years, a community that read an article saying I am a disgrace, a community that watched you write their wills and fight their evictions and fill out their permits without charging $1. He held her gaze. "That article is 4 days old. Your work is 8 years old. Which do you think weighs more?" Sloane did not answer. She looked at the bell above the door. It hung still in the dim light, the same bell that had rung for every client who ever walked through this door, the same bell that had been silent all day. "I cannot do this alone," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. The first time in 8 years she had said those words to another person. Marcus did not flinch. "Then do not." They sat on the floor for a while after that. Neither spoke. The harbor sounds settled into the kind of silence that is not empty but full, the silence of 2 people who have said the hardest things and find that the room is still standing. At 9:30, Marcus stood. He brushed the dust from his jeans. "The hearing is in 12 days, he said. "I will be there. My testimony is ready. I know. Sloane stood as well. Thank you for coming tonight. June sent me. June does not send people anywhere. She tells them where they should already be. He almost smiled, the first time she had seen anything close to a smile on his face. Good night, Sloane. Good night, Marcus. He walked out. The bell rang once. She locked the door behind him and stood in the clinic with the lights still low and the harbor murmuring outside the window. She picked up the ethics complaint folder from the floor. She did not put it back in the box. She put it in the filing cabinet, under the letter E, next to the evidence she had been building for 2 weeks. Then she turned off the lights and walked home. Tuesday morning, Sloane called Helen Marsh at the Planning Commission. I want to formally request a public hearing, Sloane said. Cromwell House, open to the community. Helen was quiet for a moment. The standard procedure is a closed panel review. Standard procedure did not include the city accepting developer-funded structural reports without independent verification. Sloane set her pen on the counter. The residents have a right to be heard, and I have evidence that the reports filed with your office are fraudulent. That is a serious allegation. I am a serious attorney. She paused. Commissioner Marsh, I'm requesting a public hearing because the people on this street deserve to know the truth about who is trying to demolish their homes and why. If the development is legitimate, a public hearing will confirm it. If it is not, the public deserves to know that too. Helen exhaled. The sound came through the phone like a decision being made. I will schedule it 2 weeks from Thursday. Cromwell House, 6 o'clock. Thank you. Sloane. Helen's voice dropped. I should have ordered an independent assessment when the reports were filed. I accepted them because the developers team presented them as routine. That was my mistake. It was. Sloane did not soften it. But you can correct it now. She hung up and looked at the empty clinic. Then she picked up the phone again and dialed a number she had not called in years. The Massachusetts Bar Association. I need to confirm that my license is active and in good standing. Bar number 74321, Sloane, Everett. 2 minutes on hold. Then, your license is active. No pending complaints. No restrictions. Thank you. She set the phone down. Active. No restrictions. Philip could waive the sealed complaint at the hearing panel, but the Bar Association would confirm what Sloane already knew. She had never been found guilty of anything. She had resigned. That was not the same as being disqualified. At 10 o'clock, she walked across the street to June's store. I need Frank's number, she said. June handed her a slip of paper without asking why. He has been waiting for you to call. Sloane called Frank from the sidewalk. He picked up on the second ring. Frank, I need your help. A pause. In 6 years, she had never said those words to him. Not once. Not when she was sick. Not when the pipes froze. Not when Lily had the flu and Sloane worked through the night with a fever of her own. What do you need? Frank asked. His voice was the same as always. Gruff, direct, no filler. The hearing is in 2 weeks. I need every person I have helped over the last 8 years to know about it. Not to fight, not to protest, to testify. Testify about what? About their experience with the clinic, about the work I have done for them, about the fact that this neighborhood is worth saving. She gripped the phone. Philip Drummond is going to try to disqualify me at the hearing by pointing to the sealed ethics complaint. The only way to counter that is with the truth. And the truth is not in documents. It is in the people I served. Frank was quiet for 3 seconds. How many people are we talking about? I do not have an exact count, but I have helped clients from this clinic 5 days a week for 8 years. I know how long you have been here. He adjusted something on his end. She heard the cap and jacket sound she associated with Frank leaving the house. "I will start today. Tommy first, then Maria, then the Chens, then everybody else." "Frank, thank you. Do not thank me yet." He hung up. Sloane walked back to the clinic. She pulled a fresh legal pad from the drawer and began building her case. Page 1. Timeline of events. The original Meridian report. Marcus's contradicting assessment. The .73 ratio, the identical document template linking the structural reports to her old ethics complaint. Page 2. Witness list. Every person who could testify to the character of the clinic and its attorney. She wrote names until she ran out of room on the page and flipped to page 3. Page 3, Phillips pattern. 3 development projects in 2 years, all using Meridian, all resulting in demolition. If she could obtain the structural reports from the other 2 projects, she could prove a systematic pattern of fabrication across multiple sites. At noon, Marcus walked in with his laptop. "I have the supplemental analysis ready for the hearing. Every building, every measurement, every discrepancy documented and cross-referenced." "Good," she looked up. "How is Ethan?" Marcus set the laptop on the counter. He asked if he could come to the harbor after school. He said Lily showed him where the best tide pools are. "She knows every one of them." Sloane almost smiled. "Send him over. Lily will be here at 3:30. Marcus opened the laptop and turned it toward her. "I also found something in the supplemental data, the .73 ratio. It does not just appear in the Marblehead reports." Sloane leaned forward. "I pulled the public filings from the other 2 Meridian projects. The ones Philip handled. Same ratio, same deflation pattern applied to real measurements to produce fabricated deficiencies." He tapped the screen. 3 projects, 3 cities, 1 formula. Sloane stared at the screen. 3 projects, 3 sets of forged structural reports, 1 attorney filing all of them. "This is not a local dispute anymore," she said. "This is a pattern of fraud across 3 jurisdictions." Marcus closed the laptop. "Which is exactly what you need to present at the hearing. And exactly what Philip is going to try to prevent." She straightened the legal pad. "He knows I have the ethics complaint comparison. He does not know I have the cross-jurisdictional data. Then do not tell him." Marcus picked up the laptop. "Let him find out at the hearing." Sloane looked at the legal pad. 3 pages of evidence, witnesses, and strategy. The bell above the door swung gently in the breeze from the open window. For the first time in weeks, the bell did not need to ring for the clinic to feel full. Frank DeLuca spent the next 10 days knocking on every door on Harbor Street. He started with Tommy at the hardware store and worked his way down the block. "She needs people," Frank told each one, "not to fight, to show up, to say what she did for them." Most of them said yes. Ruth Gaines, the Chens from the dumpling shop, Maria from the laundromat. Walter, the elderly man who had not come to his tax appointment, called Frank back and said he would be there. "I read that article," Walter told Frank, "and then I remembered who helped me keep my house when my son tried to sell it out from under me. It was not the newspaper." 3 people said no. 1 was afraid of public speaking. 1 had moved to Salem. 1 simply did not want to get involved. Frank accepted each answer without argument and moved on. By the end of the week, Frank had a list of 23 names. He brought the list to Sloane on a Monday morning and set it on the counter. 23, he said. "I could probably get more if I had another week." Sloane read the names. She knew every single one. Faces, cases, outcomes. Ruth's landlord letter, Tommy's tax lien defense, Maria's child support enforcement, the Chen's lease renegotiation, Walter's property protection. 23 people she had helped without charging $1, and all 23 had agreed to sit in a hearing room and say so. "This is more than I expected," she said. "This is less than you deserve." Frank adjusted his cap. "But it is what we have." At the clinic that afternoon, Sloane and Marcus worked side by side, preparing the evidence binder for the hearing. The counter was covered with printouts, structural photographs, measurement comparisons, and 3 sets of public filings from Meridian's other projects. Marcus was organizing the cross-jurisdictional data when his hand brushed Sloane's over a blueprint. Both of them stopped. The blueprint was spread across the counter between them. Marcus's hand was on the left edge, Sloane's was on the right. Their fingers had met in the middle, over the foundation drawing of Building 26. Neither pulled away immediately. 2 seconds. 3. Marcus cleared his throat. "The load-bearing numbers for this building are the most egregious discrepancy in the report." "I see that." Sloane moved her hand to the legal pad. Her pulse was steady. Her ears were warm. "What is the actual measurement versus the Meridian figure?" 14 inches actual. Meridian reported 4.2. He adjusted his glasses with his other hand. A deviation of that magnitude would require the building to be actively collapsing, which it is not. "Noted." She wrote the numbers on the legal pad. "We will lead with this building in the presentation." They worked for another hour. Marcus pulled up the filings from the second Meridian project. A demolished apartment complex in Worcester. Same engineer, same template, same ratio. He turned the laptop so Sloane could see the comparison. The Worcester residents lost their homes 2 years ago. The building was demolished and replaced with a mixed-use complex. Did anyone challenge the reports? No one had the evidence to... He scrolled down. But now we do. The pattern connects 3 cities, 3 projects, and 1 attorney. Sloane wrote the Worcester case number on her legal pad. If the hearing panel sees a pattern across multiple jurisdictions, this goes from a local dispute to a potential bar association investigation. That is what I was thinking. Marcus closed the laptop. Which is why Philip will fight harder than you expect. I know what Philip fights like. She capped the pen. I have the scars. Ethan arrived at 3:15 and sat in the corner with a book. Lily arrived at 3:30 and immediately went to show Ethan the tide pool drawings she had been working on. Your daughter knows the Latin names of 4 species of sea urchin, Marcus said, watching the children compare sketch pads. She memorized them from a library book last summer. Sloane stapled the evidence binder. She reads the way you measure things. Thoroughly. Is that a compliment? It is an observation. She set the stapler down, which is all I ever deal in. He looked at her for a beat longer than necessary. Then he picked up the next blueprint. The morning of the hearing, Sloane woke at 5. She stood in front of the closet and looked at the dry cleaner's bag hanging at the back. She had not worn this suit in 8 years. She had not needed it. The clinic did not require court attire. She unzipped the bag. Charcoal grey, single-breasted, the same suit she had worn to her last court appearance in Boston, the day before she received the letter from the managing partner informing her of the ethics complaint. She put it on. It fit. Lily was eating cereal at the kitchen table when Sloane walked out of the bedroom. You look different, Lily said. She set her spoon down. You look like a real lawyer. I am a real lawyer. I know, but today you look like one. Lily tilted her head. Are you going to argue in front of judges? I am going to argue in front of a panel. Sloane picked up her bag. Which is close. Are you going to win? Sloane knelt beside the table. She took Lily's hand. I am going to tell the truth, and I am going to let the people I helped tell theirs. Is that the same as winning? Sloane kissed her daughter's forehead. It is the same as trying. June arrived at 8 to take Lily for the day. She looked at Sloane in the suit and her eyes went bright. Well, June said, there you are. Sloane picked up the evidence binder, the legal pad, and the folder with the ethics complaint. She walked out the door and down Harbour Street toward Cromwell House. The morning light was sharp on the water. The harbour gleamed. The roofline of every building on the block stood solid against the sky, the way it had for 100 years. The granite foundations were not failing. The buildings were not condemned. The neighbourhood was not going to disappear. Not today. Cromwell House was full by 5:45, standing room only. The hearing room occupied the ground floor of the Georgian mansion, with tall windows that caught the evening light and wooden benches that had not been this crowded since the town's bicentennial celebration. Sloane sat at the respondent's table with her evidence binder, her legal pad, and the ethics complaint folder. Marcus sat behind her in the first row, laptop open, structural photographs loaded. Across the aisle, Philip Drummond sat at the petitioner's table with a young associate and a stack of files. He wore a navy suit and the expression of a man who had done this many times. The hearing panel consisted of 3 members: Helen Marsh as chair, the city attorney, and an independent arbitrator appointed by the county. Helen called the room to order. Philip stood first. He was polished, measured. He presented the Meridian Structural Reports as standard findings from a certified firm. He referenced building ages, coastal weathering factors, and municipal code provisions for demolition of structurally deficient properties. Then he turned to Sloane. Before we proceed to the respondent's arguments, I must raise a preliminary matter. He opened a folder. The attorney of record for the respondent, Sloane Everett, has a sealed disciplinary record with the Massachusetts Bar Association, a voluntary resignation following an ethics complaint related to the mishandling of client funds. The room murmured. Sloane kept her hands flat on the table. I am not requesting the details of the sealed complaint, Philip continued. I am simply noting for the record that the attorney challenging the credibility of Meridian's assessments has her own credibility questions that this panel should consider. Helen Marsh looked at Sloane. Do you wish to respond? Sloane stood. She buttoned her jacket. She took one breath. I do. She faced the panel. My bar license is active and in good standing. I verified this with the Bar Association 10 days ago. I have no pending complaints, no restrictions, and no disciplinary actions on my record. I resigned voluntarily 8 years ago for personal reasons that I will address in my presentation. She turned to the room. 23 faces she recognized. Frank near the back wall, June in the second row, Ruth Gaines with her daughter, Tommy and his wife, Maria, the Chens, Walter, and behind them, people she did not expect. Neighbors who had not been on Frank's list. People she had helped years ago who had heard about the hearing through word of mouth. The room was standing room only, and they were not here for the buildings. The structural deficiency reports filed by Meridian Structural Associates are fabricated. She opened the evidence binder. They are not merely inaccurate. They are systematically falsified using a consistent mathematical formula applied across every building on the Harborside block. She presented Marcus's data. The 0.73 ratio, the measurement comparisons, building by building, the photographs showing sound foundations where the report claimed critical failure. But the fabrication goes further, Sloane said. She pulled the cross-jurisdictional data from the binder. The same formula, 0.73, appears in Meridian structural reports for 2 additional projects in other Massachusetts cities, both handled by the same legal counsel, both resulting in demolition. Philip shifted in his seat. I call Marcus Hale, licensed structural engineer, to present his independent assessment. Marcus stood. He walked to the front of the room and connected his laptop to the projector. For 20 minutes, he presented his findings, building by building, measurement by measurement, photograph by photograph. His voice was steady, technical, and precise. Every building on the Harborside block has a structurally sound foundation, Marcus said. The original Meridian report contains fabricated data. I stake my professional license on that statement. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. A text from a number he recognized, his former employer. He set the phone face down and continued, "The 0.73 ratio is not a margin of error. It is a formula, applied uniformly, across 12 buildings, in 3 cities." He closed the laptop. "That is not engineering, that is fraud." He returned to his seat. His phone buzzed again. He did not look at it. Philip stood for his rebuttal. He was smoother now, more careful. He questioned Marcus's independence. He noted that the original Meridian report was conducted by a firm with a valid license. He argued that discrepancies between 2 engineering assessments were common and did not constitute evidence of fraud. "Furthermore," Philip said, turning to the panel, "the respondent's attorney has a personal history with this firm that creates a clear conflict of interest. Her challenge is not about structural integrity, it is about personal grievance." Sloane stood. "I would like to address that directly." Helen nodded. 8 years ago, I was an associate at Whitmore and Associates. I discovered that my partner, Philip Drummond, was overbilling elderly clients, fabricating consultations, charging for services never rendered. She held up the ethics complaint folder. "When I reported it, Mr. Drummond filed a fabricated ethics complaint against me using forged financial records with my electronic signature." The room was silent. "I resigned because I was 3 months pregnant, and I chose my daughter over a fight I did not have the strength for." She set the folder on the table. "The ethics complaint was never adjudicated because I did not contest it. But the forgery pattern in those financial records, the document template, the column formatting, the signature style, is identical to the pattern in the Meridian Structural Reports." She pulled both documents from the binder and held them up, side by side. Same template, same formatting, same hand, 8 years apart. The room did not move. Philip's associate stared at the table. Philip himself was still. His jaw had tightened, but his expression had not changed. Helen Marsh looked at the 2 documents. Then she looked at Philip. "We will take a 15-minute recess," she said. "When we resume, I would like to hear from the community witnesses." After the recess, Helen Marsh called the hearing back to order. The room had not emptied. If anything, there were more people. Word had spread during the break. Faces appeared at the windows from the hallway. "The panel will now hear from community witnesses," Helen said. "Each witness will have 3 minutes. Frank DeLuca was first. He walked to the front of the room in his fishing jacket and cap. He did not look at the panel. He looked at the audience. "6 years ago, the bank tried to take my house, a technicality in the mortgage. I was 62 years old, and I did not have the money for a lawyer." He paused. "Sloane Everett wrote every letter, filed every appeal, and showed up at every hearing. She did not charge me $1. She did not put her name on any of it. She just did the work." He turned to the panel. "The woman that newspaper called disgraced saved my house. I am standing here because of her. That's all I have to say." He walked back to his seat. The room was quiet. Ruth Gaines went next. She held the edge of the podium with both hands. "My landlord tried to change my locks while I was at a doctor's appointment. I brought the letter to Sloane. She read it in 30 seconds and told me the statute he cited did not exist." Ruth shook her head. "He made it up, and Sloane made sure he never did it again. She wrote a response that was so precise, so clear, so legally airtight, that the man has not spoken to me in 4 years." A quiet laugh rippled through the room. Ruth sat down. Tommy stood. She saved my hardware store from a tax lien I did not understand. The county had filed a claim for $15,000. Sloan spent a weekend going through the records and found the county had applied the lien to the wrong parcel number. My store is still open because of a woman who works out of a storefront smaller than my paint aisle. Maria, the Chens, Walter, one by one, they walked to the front of the room and spoke. Not about the buildings, not about the demolition order, about the woman who helped them. 3 minutes each, 23 witnesses, each one a story of quiet, invisible service performed without payment, without recognition, without a name on the door. The hearing room at Cromwell House had not been this full or this quiet in living memory. After the last witness, Helen Marsh looked at the panel members. The city attorney was reviewing notes. The independent arbitrator had set down her pen. Helen turned to the room. "Commissioner Marsh has a statement." She stood. Her hands were folded in front of her. The room went still. "I have served as planning commissioner for 12 years, she said. "In that time, I have approved hundreds of development filings. Most of them were routine. This one was not." She paused. "When Coastal Heritage Partners submitted the Meridian Structural Reports, I accepted them as standard documentation from a certified firm. I did not order an independent assessment. I should have." She took a breath. "When the respondent filed her appeal, I treated it as an administrative inconvenience. I should not have." She looked at Sloan. "The independent assessment conducted by Mr. Hale, combined with the cross-jurisdictional evidence presented tonight, raises serious questions about the integrity of the reports filed with this office. As planning commissioner, I'm recommending that the demolition order be suspended, pending a full investigation by the city attorney's office." Philip stood. "The petitioner objects to the suspension of a properly filed development order based on an independent review that has not been peer-verified." Helen looked at him. "Mr. Drummond, the respondent presented evidence that the same mathematical formula was used to fabricate structural deficiencies across 3 projects in 3 cities. All 3 filed by you." Philip's smile had disappeared. "Those are separate matters. They are the same pattern." Helen sat down. "The panel will deliberate." The deliberation took 14 minutes. The city attorney conferred with the arbitrator. Helen reviewed the cross-jurisdictional data one more time. When the panel returned, Helen read the decision. "The demolition order for properties at 14 through 42 Harbour Street is hereby rescinded. The panel finds sufficient evidence to question the validity of the structural assessments filed by Meridian Structural Associates. The city attorney's office will conduct an independent investigation into the reports and their filing attorney." The room exhaled. Not a cheer, not applause. An exhale, the sound of 50 people releasing a breath they had been holding for 6 weeks. In the back row, Ray Briggs stood. He walked down the center aisle to the petitioner's table. He looked at Philip Drummond. "How many?" Briggs asked. His voice was quiet. "How many reports did you fabricate?" Philip said nothing. Briggs reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. He typed a message and put it away. Then he looked at Philip one more time. "You are fired," Briggs said, "effective immediately. My office will cooperate fully with the investigation." He turned and walked out of Cromwell House. The hearing room was silent, except for the sound of his shoes on the wooden floor. Philip Drummond sat at the petitioner's table alone. His associate had already left. His files were still spread across the surface. He did not look at Sloan. He did not look at anyone. He gathered his papers, put them in his briefcase, and walked out through the side door. The room watched him go. Sloan stood at the respondent's table. Frank was beside her. June was behind her. Ruth Gaines was reaching for her hand. Marcus was still in his chair, laptop closed, watching her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. The bell in her clinic was 4 blocks away, but she could feel it ringing. The morning after the hearing, Harbour Street was different, not louder, not busier, just different. The red demolition notices were still taped to some of the doors, but nobody looked at them the same way. Sloane arrived at the clinic at 7:30. The bell rang. She set her bag on the counter and opened the window. The harbour breeze carried salt and the sound of a lobster boat heading out. At 8 o'clock, Ruth Gaines walked through the door. "I owe you an apology," Ruth said. She sat in the chair across from Sloane. "When I read that article, I doubted you. I should not have." "You had reason to doubt." Sloane folded her hands on the counter. "I should have told you the truth before the newspaper did." "Maybe." Ruth reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "My landlord sent another letter. Different this time. He wants to negotiate a new lease. Lower rent." Sloane took the paper. "He read about the hearing." "Everybody read about the hearing," Ruth smiled. "The Marblehead Gazette ran a front-page story this morning. Different tone than the last one." Sloane had not seen the paper. She made a mental note to pick one up. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. A number she recognized, this time, Ray Briggs. "Miss Everett." His voice was subdued. "I want you to know that I have terminated my relationship with Whitmore and Associates and with Meridian Structural Associates." "I saw." "I also want you to know that I have been on the phone with my project team since 6 this morning. We are exploring alternatives to demolition." Sloane leaned forward. "What kind of alternatives?" "Renovation, historic preservation. We keep the existing structures and upgrade the interiors for mixed use. Retail on the ground floor, residential above." He paused. "It will cost more, the returns will be lower, but the community stays." "That sounds like a different project." "It is a different project." His voice carried the weight of a man who had done the math and decided the numbers were not the only thing that mattered. "My mother would not have forgiven me for tearing down a neighborhood like the one she grew up in. I should have thought about that sooner." "You thought about it now." Sloane picked up a pen. "That counts for something." "I would like to meet with the community to discuss the revised proposal. Not a presentation, a conversation, the kind you said you wanted. I will organize it." "Thank you." He hung up. Sloane set the phone down. A renovation, historic preservation. The buildings would stay. The residents would stay. The neighborhood would change, but it would change on its own terms, not at the point of a demolition notice. At noon, Marcus walked in. He was carrying 2 coffees from June's store and a manila envelope. "The Bar Association opened a formal investigation into Philip Drummond this morning," he said. He set the envelope on the counter. 3 jurisdictions, 3 sets of fabricated reports. The investigating committee has requested all of Meridian's records. That was fast. Cross-jurisdictional fraud tends to accelerate things. He set the envelope down. The Worcester and Springfield projects are being reviewed as well. 3 sets of demolition orders, all based on reports with the same .73 formula. The committee has subpoena authority. He handed her a coffee. The investigation could take months, but the hearing evidence was enough to trigger it. Sloane took the coffee. Their fingers touched around the cup. She did not pull away, neither did he. "How is Ethan?" she asked. "He asked if we are staying in Marblehead." "What did you tell him?" Marcus set his coffee on the counter. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with the hem of his shirt, the gesture she had come to recognize as his version of honesty, and put them back on. "I told him, I think we are." Sloane held his gaze. "Because of the work." "Because of the work." He paused. "And because this is the first place since Seattle that feels like it might be worth staying in." "That is not a professional reason." "No, it is not." He picked up his coffee. I am working on being honest about non-professional things. It is a new skill. Sloane almost smiled. You are doing well for a beginner. They stood at the counter with their coffees, and the afternoon light came through the window, and for the first time since the demolition notices arrived, the silence in the clinic was not empty, it was full. The kind of full that happens when two people who have spent years building walls find a moment where the walls are not necessary. At 3:30, Lily and Ethan arrived together. Lily was carrying her sketchpad. Ethan was carrying a book about marine biology that Lily had lent him. We found a new tide pool, Lily announced. Ethan says the starfish in it might be a different species. She is probably right, Marcus said. She usually is. Sloane watched the children settle into their respective corners, Lily drawing, Ethan reading, and she looked at Marcus, who had gone back to his laptop, and at the counter covered in evidence binders that no longer needed to be evidences, and at the bell above the door that had started ringing again. She walked to the window. Harbour Street was the same. The hardware store, the laundromat, the dumpling shop, June's general store with the display she changed every week. The buildings were standing, the people were here, and Sloane Everett was visible, and it had not destroyed her. Marcus appeared beside her at the window. He did not speak. He just stood there, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and the salt air on his shirt. She reached for his hand. He took it. They stood at the window and watched the harbour turn gold. 3 weeks after the hearing, a sign went up on the front of the clinic. Sloane watched from across the street while the installer drilled the brackets into the granite facade. The sign read, Sloane Everett, Attorney at Law, Harbourside Legal Aid Clinic. White letters on blue, visible from the end of Harbour Street, visible from the harbour pier, visible from everywhere she had spent 8 years trying not to be seen. June walked out of the general store and stood beside her on the sidewalk. It looks good, June said. It looks terrifying. Those are the same thing, sweetheart. June squeezed her arm. When are you going to stop being surprised that people want to know your name? Probably never. Sloane watched the installer tighten the last bolt. But I am going to stop hiding it. The bell rang inside the clinic. Ruth Gaines was standing in the doorway, waving. Your 9 o'clock is here, Ruth called, and your 10 o'clock just walked in behind her. Sloane crossed the street and walked through the door. The bell rang. 2 clients sat in the waiting chairs. A third was on the phone, leaving a message. The legal pads were stacked on the counter, the filing cabinet was open, and the morning light came through the window and caught the edge of the new sign, casting a faint blue reflection on the wall. She sat behind the counter. She picked up a pen. Good morning. She looked at the first client. What can I help you with? The morning moved the way mornings had always moved at the clinic. Legal questions, paperwork, phone calls, the steady rhythm of a storefront that existed for one purpose, to help. At noon, Frank walked in with a rolled-up newspaper. He set it on the counter and pointed at the headline. Front page. He tapped the paper. Massachusetts Bar Association suspends Philip Drummond pending investigation into systematic document fraud across 3 jurisdictions. Sloane read the headline. She read the first paragraph. Then she folded the newspaper and set it aside. Good, she said. Frank waited. That is it. Good. What do you want me to say, Frank? I am not going to celebrate another person's downfall. She picked up her pen. I'm going to do the work I came here to do. Frank grunted. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met. I know. She went back to the file in front of her. That is why you keep coming back. He walked out. The bell rang. From outside, she heard him muttering something to June about stubbornness and muffins. At 3:30, the door opened. Lily and Ethan tumbled in together. Lily was holding a mason jar full of seawater. Ethan was holding a field guide open to a page about hermit crabs. We found a hermit crab at tide pool number 7, Lily said. Ethan thinks it is a long-clawed species. Pagurus longicarpus, Ethan said. He showed the field guide to Sloane. The claw structure matches. Show me, Sloane said. She leaned across the counter to look at the jar. The tiny crab shuffled sideways in the water, dragging a borrowed shell. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind the children. He was carrying his laptop bag and 2 iced teas from June's store. I have news, he said. He set the teas on the counter. I filed the paperwork to open an independent structural assessment firm, Hale Engineering, based in Marblehead. Sloane looked at him. You are staying. I am staying. He handed her a tea. Ethan starts school here in September. I signed the lease on the cottage for a year. A year. To start. He took a sip of his tea. I have learned not to plan too far ahead, but Marblehead seems like a good place to be present. Sloane held the cold glass against her palm. The condensation ran between her fingers. It is a good place to be present. They stood at the counter while the children compared hermit crab observations, and the afternoon light shifted across Harbour Street. The harbour was calm. The fishing boats rocked in their moorings. Tommy was painting the trim on the hardware store, the same trim the developer had wanted to demolish. I want to ask you something, Marcus said. His voice was quieter now. And I want you to know that the answer does not change anything about the work. Sloane set her tea down. Ask. There is a concert at the Harbour Pavilion on Saturday evening. Chamber music. Ethan says he will watch Lily if we go. Ethan is 12. Ethan is 12 going on 40. Marcus adjusted his glasses. He has been taking care of himself for 2 years. He can manage an evening. Sloane looked at him. The afternoon light caught the silver at his temples and the wire rims of his glasses, and something in his eyes that she had not allowed herself to name until this moment. Saturday evening, she said. I would like that. He smiled. Not a half smile, not an almost smile, a real one, the kind that changed his whole face. Good, he said. Good. The bell rang as the door opened. A new client walked in. A woman Sloane did not recognize, holding a folder and looking around the clinic with the uncertain expression of someone who has never asked for legal help before. Sloane straightened behind the counter. She set her tea aside and picked up a fresh legal pad. Welcome to Harbourside Legal Aid, she said. My name is Sloane Everett. How can I help you? The woman sat down. The bell settled above the door. Outside, the harbour turned gold in the late afternoon light. The same gold it had turned every evening for 100 years, over the rooftops and granite foundations and the storefront where a woman had finally put her name on the door. What did you think of Sloane and Marcus's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications to keep up with all our stories. And do not miss more heartwarming tales by clicking on the screen now.